Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. We're here, it's raining, it's horrible, it's turning autumn, it's turning winter, and all those other good things. We're going to jump in with our guest, Tim Watkins, because he's here with us for a short time, and he put up a post on LinkedIn about the potential, I suppose you could say, for urban air mobility vehicles and things like that, and it caused a bit of a storm. It didn't cause a storm, but there were definitely some people arguing about it, and I'm a little bit touchy on the subject at the minute because I posted up, there was that article about how bad Lilium was, and I posted that up, and someone's having a really good pop at me and threatening things like law and I must stay away from people's money because they think I wrote that article. I didn't write that article. So if they haven't done the due diligence on who wrote that article, I'm not sure they've done their due diligence on Lilium.
Isn't LinkedIn a wonderful place? It's like Facebook for even smaller children.
I love it. I've got
the thing that surprised me is, typically I don't post that often. I comment a bit, and maybe if a post get a few hundred, if I'm lucky, maybe into low thousands of people looking at it, and the odd comment and the odd share. And then this thing, at the moment, just checked it a little while back, it's up at something like about pushing 60,000 views and about 700 and something likes of all the different flavors, and pushing 200 comments with lots of really good debate, which I think is excellent. I'm really glad people are actually engaging and chatting about it, but I am blown away by how I've suddenly almost accidentally hit on such a hot topic. So.
Well, I think your schoolboy error really, Tim, was posting a little bit of truth. That doesn't work in our modern world. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's
on the reality of some of LinkedIn is you do get a lot of pretty CAD renderings, a lot of hype, and actually, if you dig into the underlying physics, it's just not there. Or not there as they would like you to think it is.
Absolutely. Well, I should introduce you a little bit more formally, I suppose. Ex-RF engineering officer, then a lead flight test engineer at Pilatus, and you're currently a flight test engineer, fixed-wing flight dynamics instructor at the Empire Test Pilot School at Boscombe Downs. So in no way are you qualified to speak on any subject in the aviation.
But does he have 3D renderings to prove all this?
Exactly. Yes, he hasn't got 3D.
I've got some nice photographs in various places. One thing I would actually stress, and this is important, I'm here purely in my personal capacity. So this is me, my views. It's nothing to do with ETPS, nothing to do with my parent employer at all.
Sure. But I mean, it's honest. Now, I think you've got some slides for us, show and tell.
Okay. So. Now, let's see if we can get this to work, because it's my first time on using this platform. So let me just see if I can share. Oh, that's looking good. Is that coming across for you guys?
There we go. Add to stream, and yeah, there we go.
Brilliant. So let's see if we can get this to work. There we go. That's the offending chart, isn't it?
It is.
That's the one that caused all the excitement. So let me just talk through it very briefly. Firstly, this is an official chart. This isn't something made up. It's actually quite old. I think this goes back to a textbook back in the sort of mid-60s originally. And in fact, a modern version of this is something we used to teach our students at ETPS. So it is a thing. Let me talk about the axes. Bottom axis, we've got something called disk loading. Okay, and that is basically the weight of the air vehicle divided by how much area you are using to exert the thrust. So something like a helicopter, it's got a big rotor disc, so there's lots of area in there, lots of square meters, which means the weight per square meter in terms of the thrust you have to exert to balance the weight is quite low. At the other end of the scale, we've got things like the Harrier, where all of that thrust is coming out of probably less than 2 square meters of jet nozzle, and you've got quite a heavy aircraft. So that means that you're pushing, well into the tens of thousands of kilograms per square meter, which is a whole different order of magnitude of engineering. So that's disk loading. The thing we're really interested in, though, is this vertical axis. Okay, so this vertical axis is basically power loading. So it's kilograms per kilowatt. It's basically how many kilograms of mass are you able to support in the air with each kilowatt of power. So you can see here the helicopters, it's quite good, maybe 7 kilograms per kilowatt. Down at your Harrier sort of end of the scale, you're getting close to more like 1 kilogram per kilowatt. So that means that to carry a payload, you need an awful lot more powerful engines and an awful lot more fuel burn for your direct lift type aircraft than you would for your helicopters. And then the other categories you can see are these intermediate here. So yeah, is that coming across all right for everyone?
Very much so. Yes, I'm still here. Oh,
Okay,
here we
well,
are, Drone Racer.
Good.
Here's a
good
comment
stuff.
straight away. We'll start with one, but we'll put that in the bank.
Okay. Right. So, you happy for me to carry on?
Of course, you carry on, and we'll do
Yeah.
the questions afterwards.
Okay, no, that's fine. So here is a slightly modified version of the diagram. This was actually sent to me on the LinkedIn chat by a very nice chap called Dr. Stephen Pryor. And he's managed to get hold of a version of this diagram. I don't know if he produced it or if someone else did, where you can see here it's listing some of the sort of eVTOL urban air mobility type vehicles and where they fit on the diagram. So if I pick out a few that you might be aware of, up here is the Volocopter, the sort of Volocity with its multiple propellers on top of the sort of the disc type arrangement on the fuselage. Cartocopter, so this is the Jaunt Rosa, will be somewhere in here. Our favorite Chinese multicopter, the EHang, that's in here. The City Airbus and the Airbus Vahana, they're in here. The Cora, it was Kitty Hawk, it's now Whisk. The Joby S4, and then down the bottom here, we've got the Lilium Jet. So you can see the Lilium Jet needs an awful lot of energy, a lot of power to hover, because it's basically relying on moving not very much air very, very fast in order to generate the lift. Whereas up this end of the scale, they're moving lots of air not very fast, which takes a lot less power. So Lilium's potentially got quite a high cruise speed because of that. But what it does mean is that they need to really, really limit their time in the hover and in the transition to cruise flight, because every second is going to be burning an awful lot of battery energy. So, you know, they're not designed to be vertical flying for very long. They've got to get wingborne as soon as they possibly can. Whereas at this end of the scale, you know, they've got lower power requirements for that vertical flight part, but they might then have a lower cruise speed. So there is a trade-off to be made. So that basically explains the sort of the underlying theory. So go for it. Hit me with questions, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, we had that one there, not comparable since the wing provides the lift. Perhaps that last slide addressed that. I'd be quite interested to see light aircraft. Go away, UBC. Light aircraft on that list and see where they fit it in, because that would look that would really skew the scale, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Let me reply to Drone Racer. He's right in a sense. Comparing a rotor-borne craft to a wing-borne craft is not comparing like with like. However, they have in common something called the lift-to-drag ratio. And when you're looking at cruising flight, lift-to-drag ratio is basically the thing that determines your range for the amount of energy that you've got. So something like a modern jet aircraft, you'll have a very high lift-to-drag ratio, maybe sort of 16, 17 in the cruise. Typical light aircraft, maybe 10 to 12. Helicopters are down in the single digits. So having a rotor does limit you in terms of cruise speed and in terms of lift to drag ratio. So that's why, for example, the US military has been so keen to pursue tilt rotors with the V-22, because that has a much better lift to drag ratio in the cruise, and it has none of the limitations of having a horizontal rotor on top of the vehicle, which would limit your speed. So it's a lot of complexity to get that, but it does give them that extra range compared to equivalent helicopters.
Well, that's the sort of thing, isn't it? I mean, in our world, and others jump in, don't let me do all of this. In our world, it's the simplicity at the lower weight cell. Let's say a machine of less than 100 kilos can be separate lift thrust in that some make it go up, some make it go along, and there are no moving parts. As soon as you start tilting and moving or adjusting blades in flight, giving pitch to blades, and the complexity goes through the roof, and it just, to get things certified and stuff would be nuts. And I personally, I don't understand how, I don't understand most of the world really, but how people with great big renderings can get so much money spent on them so quickly without anything really proven. Because again, that graph that doesn't come from a great deal of data. That only comes from a lot of simulated data and what they think it's going to do in most of those cases. Whisk perhaps not, they've got a lot of flight data or whatever it is now. But there's very little flight data to support that. At what point, as a flight test engineer, do you think? What I'm trying to say is there enough data to make your assumptions valid? Is it 100 hours, 1 hour, 1 minute?
Well, to be honest, if you really know the underlying maths, you can actually make quite a lot of good approximations just based on photographs and some basic dimensions and figures for power. It is absolutely possible to do that. So, with that sort of engineer's eye, let me show you another slide, which you might find interesting. What I've picked here is what I consider to be the most promising VTOLs that I've come across. Now, this is just a personal view, and I haven't analysed them in any huge depth, but I just want to give you a flavour of why I think they're potentially goers. So let me share this again.
Yeah, waiting for it to pop up.
Window. There we go. So you should have a little pop up there.
Here it comes. There we go. Okay,
so there's 8 of them there, and you'll probably recognise quite a few of them. I'll talk about each one very briefly. So this is the Hyundai one over on the top left here. Now, why is my laser pointer not working? There we go. That's better. Right. So that's the Hyundai. So this is a mixture of some lift-only propellers and some tilting ones. So it's a bit of a hybrid. It's sort of slightly combined lift thrust, slightly tilt rotor. And so that's got a lot of moving parts. But on the other hand, having these tilting props will mean that you're not carrying around too much dead weight. Whereas the Cora, for example, separate lift and thrust, it means it's carrying around all this weight and all this drag when it's in the cruise. So it's very, very simple, and they've had a lot of successful flights with this. So I think its simplicity is a real plus, and they'll probably get through a lot of the safety and reliability certification issues because it's so simple. But the trade-off there is there's a lot of drag, and therefore the performance is not going to be as good as it could be. Volocopter, they've gone for, again, just multiple lifting rotors, no moving parts other than the motor armatures effectively. So again, very simple, very reliable, very light. Where they'll suffer is their lift-to-drag ratio will be awful. So their range will be fairly limited. But if you're just hopping around, from an airport to a city and it's a 10-minute flight, then maybe that's enough. So these vehicles are all aiming for slightly different things. This is the vertical Aerospace X4. I'm a massive fan of this one, and I've got quite a few old colleagues who are working for Vertical now, so that I know they've got some really, really good people there. And you can see that their design has got some parallels with the Hyundai design, but it's a little bit smaller, a bit more compact, and basically only the rotors at the front tilt forwards for thrust, and then I think these four at the back of the wing are going to just be used for the lift. So sort of kind of a halfway house really between what Hyundai are doing and the Cora. And then down here is the Joby. This is the one which I actually think is most likely to be successful first. Several reasons. Joby have got some hugely, hugely good people. Some of my ex-Pilatus colleagues are there. I know one of their test pilots came from the F-35 flight test program, and he's an ex-ETPS instructor. So, they've got an absolutely top-notch team. They've got big contracts with NASA. They've got a lot of funding behind them. They've got a lot of experience building up through their work with NASA as well. So you can see these guys have got a combination of tilting, It's basically a multiple tilt rotor, really. So everything gets converted into thrust from lift. So that means that there's no sort of wasted energy, if you like. There's no stuff not being used in either phase of flight. So I think if I had to put money on it, this would be the one I would put the money on.
But that one that looks like the Feely Rotodyne, that's so futuristic. Look at it in the middle there. It's wonderful. Is it an autogyro?
This is the Jaunt Rosa. So it's basically what's called a compound gyrocopter. It's got propellers for thrust, and it's got wings, really high aspect ratio wings. So this will be very efficient in terms of lift to drag in the cruise. And as I understand it, I haven't spoken to them, and I need to get some more details out of them. But as I understand it, what they do with the rotor is very clever. They basically spin it up for what's called a jump takeoff. So it uses stored energy in the rotor to get itself in far enough off the ground to transition into forward flight. It then becomes an autogyro for a while until the wings take over. And then once the wings are generating enough lift, they slow the rotor right down. So it's not generating any lift, and it also doesn't generate a great deal of drag. So this is a bit like the Cartercopter designs. It's got some commonality with the something called the XV1, which was a McDonnell Douglas design, quite a few decades ago, and also the Fairey Rotodyne. So that's another one I think could be very successful because of ease of certification and a huge amount of options if things fail. You can auto rotate, you can glide. You can't say that about this one or about the E-Hang. If they lose power to everything, you're going to drop very fast. So I really like this design from a safety point of view.
I still think there's a lot to be said for trebuchets. Much simpler.
It's the landing system, isn't it? It's the other
What
end.
is the reason for they've gone with so many rotors on the top center? That it's substantially more than everyone else. You look at it and think, what benefit are they trying to get there compared to, say, the one to the left, the one to the, those are the copters? Well,
simpler rotors, smaller motors. I mean, this is not very much above sort of model aircraft technology and small ES technology, really. Simple fixed pitch propellers. They control everything just by varying the speeds of the rotors on different parts of the overall disc. So it's got a lot of reliability and fail-safe built into it on the mechanical side. I think my concern would be the electrical side. I don't know how much they've split it up into, different circuits. How many batteries could you lose? How many speed controllers could you lose before things start becoming difficult? I'd hope, though, that they've done a good job on that.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you just look at it compared? It is very different to the other aircraft as well.
Well, it must have the most hours of all of them there. That's been around the longest.
Yeah, quite possibly. It's been flying a long time. And again, they've got some pretty solid backing. So if they can get through certification, I think that's another one we could see hitting the streets at some point.
But one thing with these multi-rotor designs, like the middle one, top middle there, is that anyone that's flown a model multi-rotor knows if you want to get any forward speed, you've got to put quite a bit of tilt on. That's going to be a bit disconcerting, isn't it, for the passengers? How are you going to get over that? You're looking at the ground because you're moving forward at a reasonable cruise speed.
I think probably it will be slow. And to be honest, from a power point of view and a range point of view, that's probably the best thing to do. So yeah,
because it doesn't look particularly tilted, does it? That whole top, in forward flight, there's going to be some movement inside. Unless you have swing seats, Bruce. You have seats which you just swing.
Pendulum seats, that's what you need. But the thing that strikes me about all these things is their complexity. I'm a great believer in KISS. Keep it simple. The less you've got, the less you've got to go wrong. And all these articulated motor systems and multiple thrust motors, it's like we've got helicopters that have two rotors and they fly really well. Why do we need all this?
Well, it's to take advantage of distributed propulsion, which is the thing that electric motors gives you the ability to do. Whether it pays off long term, I don't know. I mean, all of these things are going to have massively reduced range compared to the helicopter equivalents in terms of range and payload.
And helicopters are proven to be quite reliable. They have failure modes which are well understood, water rotation and so forth. So we're looking at I don't see the benefit. Yeah, it's fancy and it's wonderful and it's fashionable and it's very trendy. But where are the actual commercial benefits? Because the other thing we've got to look at is you can run a helicopter for an awfully long time on a few gallons of Jet A1. Just keep filling the damn thing up when it's empty. These things that the ground support, the recharging or battery swapping or whatever, must push the economics in the wrong direction by a long way.
Well, it's interesting. I think it depends on the whole charging model. If they are getting, a good rate for their electricity, then their actual operating costs could be considerably lower than conventional helicopters from a fuel point of view, and potentially from a maintenance point of view, because there's far fewer moving parts compared to a helicopter rotor head. And I think there's hopes that the noise levels will be lower.
So the big thing that strikes me, though, is that as long as your aircraft's sitting on the ground, it's not earning you money. And if it has to sit there for an hour and recharge because you don't want to have a short battery life, then you got 50% of your day is lost unless you can swap batteries in and out. And so that aircraft is now twice as expensive as it needs to be compared to something you can fill up in 5 minutes at a Bowser.
Yeah, and that's a very valid point. I mean, the whole thing of do you use fast charge and as you say, shorten the battery life as a result, or do you swap battery packs? That whole discussion, I think, still got to be had in terms of what's the best practical and cost-effective way to do it.
Or more aircraft, I guess. More aircraft.
But is there an aircraft? Is an elephant in the room? The fact that that really, quite honestly, commercial short-distance helicopter rides haven't, pun intended, taken off anywhere in the world. They're very expensive. They're really not everywhere. Not everybody's flying into the centre of London, and for these things to work, they'll need to be cheap enough that lots of people can use them.
Yeah.
And second to that, of course, you need the infrastructure on the rooftops and other places for that charging or whatever else.
Well,
there's too many.
Or you have enough of them, really, just to cycle. If we look at the way does it become more of a consumer? Cars are said to be moving more towards a lease or they said as we move more towards electric, cars will become more you open your door and pick a pool car up and drive it away, and that's where some companies are betting their money. Perhaps this will become the same thing. You don't have one, you have 10, and there's a constant rotation, and if the cost savings from the maintenance over 2-3 years could easily cover the cost of multiple aircraft.
And remember, a lot of these things are being pitched as self-drive, they're pilotless aircraft. So we're going to have driverless cars. So when you want to go somewhere, you just like an Uber, but the car just pulls up, you jump in, and it drives you to where you want to go. And if it's a Tesla and you sit in the back seat, you crash and catch on fire. But apart from that, it's totally safe. The failure modes of an electric vehicle on the ground are much lower than that of something hoisted above your head by several hundred feet or higher. So I think this is people who have seen the opportunity to engage in a bit of hype and create a market that doesn't exist based solely on unrealistic promises and expectations. And as usual, you've got a lot of investors who just don't do their due diligence. They don't crunch the numbers. They don't sit back and go, is this the best solution? If we build this, will they come? Because at the moment, I can't see the economics of this panning out at all in any way, shape or form. It's like drone delivery. Yeah, there's some very small use cases which do add up, but the vast majority of use cases are just dreaming. It's I would not put $1 of my money into these things because I can't see how I'd get even 50 cents back.
I think where you will find some use, and there'll be some niche markets. I think the VIP short range transport element could work, partly because people with high net worth who can afford to spend the money will want to be seen in such vehicles. There may be a city limits emergency medical service type role for them as well. Because if they're lower noise, if they're zero emissions at point of use, these are all pluses, and there are certainly politicians willing to throw money at that sort of thing. And also the US Army, don't forget, has really got on board with this. The US military is throwing some big money at JB. So they're looking for applications for it. I think we will see the odd one achieve certification and go into service. I think the issue is going to be numbers. If they can make the economics work and they can undercut conventional helicopters over the short range routes, then they might find that actually there is a bit of a market there. But they've got
But
a
as you
lot of-
say, the numbers, when you look at amortizing the development costs over a small number of numbers, then the economics again get completely screwed up. If you've spent hundreds of millions of dollars and you're making 3 of them, well, they're too expensive. No one can afford them. And even the net worth people, they are high net worth because they're careful with their money. They don't waste it on things that are frivolous like that. They just get a helicopter because that works. It's there. It's safe. And unless they're really, really extremely wealthy, in which case, again, you're talking very small numbers. It's again, we'll look at his, the guy Ford that developed industrialized the motor car. He made his money from selling lots of cheap things. It's very hard to make a lot of money by selling a few very expensive things. It exposes you to massive fluctuations in markets. I wouldn't put my money into it at this stage because it's a solution, an unproven solution, looking for a problem that at this stage doesn't exist.
I think the problem is it depends what the world does. Like if we go back 2 years, there would be people tripping over themselves in Canary Wharf to buy a daily way out to get back out of the centre of London. As Tim was saying earlier, there are the VIPs, there's the people who earn substantially more than the reality. However, COVID has also changed this, and we're no longer in the same situation we were even 2 years ago, where you have the office dwellers in the centre of London for the bigger banks, for the big financial institutions. These guys may never go back, and that could even have an impact on this too.
And here's the other thing with these machines: if you've got a port, let's say they do the A to B to C, so you get in it, you go, I want to go to there, and that's area B that I'm going to, zone B. Then you've got zone Z. The problem is, if one zone is always busy, when this drone arrives and everyone gets out and it has to charge, it sits there for an hour occupying that landing pad space. You could end up where for an hour, if it can't battery swap, for over an hour, it'll sit there and hog that landing space where no other aircraft can land until it goes again. So they've got to come up with some sort of battery system, and then are the batteries going to be interchangeable? So this port area where they go to, are they all going to be the same batteries? Because they're not, are they? Let's be realistic. They're not going to get together and use a universal battery. Because
universal connector.
They'd be too big to swap. The weight of the batteries on these would be
some big lads. Lots of big lads required.
When it lands, it's going to sit there for at least an hour, if not less, to charge. You've got to put quick charge infrastructure in, and quick charge infrastructure is horrendously expensive. Even if you put a battery system to back it up, because there's talk of doing it in London to rooftops and everything. You've got to put portable you want to get another battery up there so that you can trickle charge that battery then to quick charge the actual aircraft's battery. So the cost is not as simple as putting the quick charging. The infrastructure nightmare is going to be astronomical. And like
you can deal with that though, Mark. You can only do routes where there's enough battery left that it will go to a charge hub. So you have a charge hub dotted around the place. So your route goes, okay, it lands, it then takes back off. The autonomy element of this is easy. Let's be realistic. We can make the autonomy element today. We can put a GPS, we can put a flight controller on it, and we can tell it where to go. That side of it is easy.
Yeah, but just before Mark, the problem is that what you're saying is you're adding extra unprofitable flight miles to every journey, and that again reduces the economics. It's all about economics. Technically, we can do this stuff, but can we make a profit out of it? And I don't believe we can.
Do we know what kilowatt these are? Does anyone know the battery size? Has anyone actually published any sort of sizes of batteries in these things?
I'm trying to think.
No,
there's some broad brush stuff out there, but it's broad brush. And the whisk thing. Do you remember when we had the chaps in that? I can't remember his name now. That said, remember we spoke about it a couple of years ago and said that's a weird looking propeller that can't work. And then the bloke that designed it said, "Oh, I designed that." And he came and chatted to us, and then I had to pull the video down because Google got upset. But anyway, that's another story because they've got all this. There's some interesting technology developments in there. Is where I was going to take this sort of weird segue. And is this not? I'm that electric aviation is coming, but it's not going to be. It's not going to be brand new. It's going to be evolution rather than revolution. It's going to be standard stuff we know and love and know how to fix is going to get converted. It's all going to get more efficient. And I think all of this this fancy hovering stuff is taking the focus away from where the work should be. Really, that's my opinion.
Yeah. Can I just bring up another couple of slides, because I think
You certainly may.
Discussion that we've had. Let me just share this one with you. Some of you and some of the people watching might have seen this before. This was produced by the American Helicopter Society, and it's basically a list of, last time there was a massive "we want to do VTOL" sort of boom, was from the mid 50s all the way through to the sort of early 80s, really. And there was an awful lot of prototypes were produced, and an awful lot of experiments were done, a lot of money spent, mostly in America, a little bit in Europe, and a bit in Russia. And you can see here they've got 45 different vehicles listed, all manner of configurations. And they've arranged this. So this is called the VSTOL wheel. And it's salutary to note that of the 45 prototypes that were all flown, and some of them were flown extensively over many years, the only ones that have actually entered production and use, all in the military, are the V-22, the Harrier, which I know and love, having had the privilege of working on it for a few years, the Russian Yak-38, and then most recently the F-35B, the Lightning II, which is in service now with multiple Western nations. So that's not a great hit rate, is it? You look at how many prototypes are made and how many actually ended up in production. It's basically 4. So it's not a high number.
So, as an engineering professional, what as a group do you take from? Do you take as much data from? Does it really help shape your dartboard, as you've done earlier, the darts to throw with your professional knowledge? I mean, are people what I'm trying to say is, are people currently reinventing many wheels that have been tried before?
I think there is an element of truth to that statement, yes, because you look at all those designs on that wheel, and all of the new ones are pretty much repeating something to either, mostly or full extent of what's been tried before. And all those ones that didn't work before, often it was for mechanical reasons, or the range was poor, or the fuel consumption was horrendous, or the payload was low. And so for all those reasons, the sponsor said, actually, we're not going to bring this into service because it doesn't do what we want. And swapping out the fossil fuel system and putting in an electrical propulsion system is not going to fix that. There are some advantages to distributed propulsion that might work. But I think
now Wolf mentioned that one. I just want to bring that up because he's saying about the 200-kilometer train trip. Well, of course, the interesting thing that's happened in Germany, and I think it's France as well, is they're proposing a ban on short distance flights if you can take a train. So if that takes off as an idea, and it's not a bad idea, city centre to city centre, then that really will scupper a lot of these designs that were supposed to be doing just those trips.
But isn't that ban based on the use of fossil fuels and keeping the planet? So if you're using electricity, it wouldn't apply. Electric vehicles would get out of jail free card, unless you've got coal-fired power generation or something, I suppose.
But the problem is, aren't they? The issue with this element of the industry is they're not trying to solve the same problem everyone else. If we look at electric cars, the reason the world is trying to move forward with hybrid and electric is because we all know cars are heavily polluting. They're massively used. They're used en masse. It's a problem. The problem with these copters is they're not solved. It's not an ecological problem. We've not got thousands of helicopters moving around cities every minute of the day, causing huge amounts of congestion. The issue that they're doing this to try and make it more accessible for the most part, and electric is the simplest way of doing that, isn't it? It allows vertical, it's a smaller package, weight, less cost, less maintenance. But the drive behind it isn't the same as most of the other electrification. And I think that's where it falls over. If anything, the impact of this taking off will be far worse than the impact of just more helicopter flights, because of the whole effect of building infrastructure, batteries, the power stations alone. This energy isn't free. I think the big problem we've currently heading for, especially in the UK, is with this energy has to come from somewhere. Everyone starts plugging in hybrids, then that just, all you're doing is squeezing the balloon. It's just going to pop out another part of the back end of it, but it's the same balloon, whether it's oil, whether it's gas, whether it's electric. until we really get in a position where we're generating enough, and we're not really generating enough now to cope. Once all these cars come online, it's a big problem.
Now, I think we've got a tip for potential developers here. We can give this out freely. If you want your eVTOL project to succeed, it must be made out of recycled shopping bags.
And nuclear.
No, just recycled plastic. That's all. It's going to save the planet. You know, it's made of wood and recycled plastic, and that will get just 3D renderings with wood grain effect. That'll get the investors flocking to it.
It's interesting because, like in the UK, we're beginning to see a mass push to EV and electric now. Just for instance, this year, I've seen more electrics on the road than I've ever seen. Company car lists are updating dramatically now to have EVs and full electrics. My own company car list has got an electric on it. There's this target, which I don't think we'll hit, but in the next 5 years, you're going to see a mass change in the UK. And that has been driven from the fact of it's an ecological problem that we have to solve. I just don't see there's the same drive behind this. This is a different problem. And I'm not sure it's even a problem.
But there will be, as Tim said, there will be the maintenance savings with the electric systems, particularly with electrified, shall we say, conventional aircraft, where it will be just a big motor with a big propeller and swap it all out.
See, that makes sense. If we started replacing jet engines with electric, that ecological problem makes sense, but it's a much bigger problem.
Hang on. Before we go down that road, I want to share a slide on exactly that point.
It's almost like we've worked this out and it's rehearsed.
Right. Can you all see that okay?
There we can now.
Right. This is from a talk I gave to the Royal Aero Society back in 2019. It's all on their website. But what I'll do, Gary, is I'll send you the link separately and we can publish them after the event. This just gives you an idea of the power required to move an aeroplane. Okay, so we've got maximum takeoff mass down the bottom. Let me just bring up the laser pointer because it makes more sense to use that. There we go. So we've got maximum takeoff mass down the bottom. And to give you an idea, around this region is our sort of 2 to 4 seater light aircraft. Up here, we're getting into our 6, 7 seaters. Up here, we're getting into our sort of 10 to 15 seater type aircraft. So this is basically the upper limit of the non-commuter category of what we call Part 23 for fixed wing. This is the installed power. So this is typically the engines, the maximum power rating of the engines installed. So you can see that your 4-seaters, you need sort of somewhere between 100, 150 kilowatts. And then as you push up the size scale, so that's a low-powered 4-seater. That's a 4-seater. Here's the Islander, so sort of 6 or 7-seater. We're now up to 400 kilowatts. It won't use all of that for the cruise. That's for takeoff. Pilatus PC-12, which is a lovely aeroplane, a 9, 10-seater aircraft, very capable for cargo freight and people, and for short takeoff and landing. That's got pushing a megawatt of installed power. Okay, with that turboshaft in that aeroplane. Now, in the cruise, as a very rough rule of thumb, a fixed-wing aircraft will use around about a third of the takeoff power if it's a propeller aircraft. Okay, so that means your PC-12 is going to use 900 kilowatts or so for takeoff and climb. And then once it's in the cruise, that will drop down to maybe about 300 kilowatts. Okay, but, do that for a couple of hours. That is an enormous amount of power. It's absolutely vast. And there's no way you can realistically do that with batteries. You'll get a few minutes rather than the hours that you need with those sorts of power ratings. So the fundamental problem we have here is electric aviation using batteries is only suitable for these little aeroplanes down the bottom here. Your 2-seaters, possibly your 4-seaters. Once you start going up in scale, unless you're going to fly around awfully slowly and take a long time to get there, then you need these high powers. And that is the problem.
They've got that Magnix. People have got the Caravan flying. That other thing is currently flying across the North Atlantic to do the trials in Benbaculia or wherever it is up there, somewhere up there, isn't it? So are they barking up the wrong tree as well? Then those are my great hope.
Well,
don't remove the hope.
I have another slide that answers exactly that question. Here we go. Right. So I did a bunch of maths on this. This was for the Royal Aero Society a couple of years ago, and came up with this thing here called the range ratio. Okay, and the range ratio on the vertical axis here is how far you can go with a fossil fuel and a conventional engine compared to battery and electric motor. Okay, and this again is our masses, and these are our various aeroplanes. So down here are little 1 seat and 2 seats, sort of 4 seats, up to 6, 7 seats here, and these are your sort of your 10 seaters up the top. So with current battery technology, and this is cutting edge, by the way, 250 watt hours per kilogram at battery pack level, not at cell level, you can see that the little aeroplanes, you're only going to get about a quarter of the range from the battery version as you would from the conventional engine version. As the aircraft gets bigger and heavier, that range reduction becomes massive. Okay, so Britain Norman Islander, if you electrify it, you'll only get, well, you'll get 9 times less range, about 11% of the range that you would if it was fossil fueled. And it just gets worse. Once you get up here to the big aeroplanes, you can see you're looking at a range reduction factor of about 15, which makes it completely untenable. You just couldn't make it work commercially, or there wouldn't be any real mission for it. The only thing
you best leave LinkedIn. You better get off LinkedIn. They're going to lynch you. They'll lynch you there. They'll lynch you.
Electric powered dirigibles are the future.
Well, the only thing you can do with things like your electric caravans and the like is short range routes. There is a role for that. Harbour Air in Seattle have electrified a de Havilland Beaver, I think it was. There's this, the Magnets have electrified. You know, they will be able to do 100, maybe 200 nautical miles in visual flight rules conditions. And you know what? There are some mission sets, particularly in big places like the United States and Australia, where that will be perfectly useful. But it's going to be a niche, and it's certainly not going to be people piling on electric airplanes to head off to Spain for their holidays. You know, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah. But isn't the hope for that hydrogen? Everyone's beginning to yell hydrogen now, aren't they? Hydrogen.
No,
They're just
hydrogen sucks as a fuel.
I know, but it's also a bit of greenwashing, I think, isn't it, on behalf of the fuel companies? But maybe there's going to be a slide about that. I don't know. But
well, there is actually. In a minute.
Have you got one for nuclear power as well? If you haven't got one, Tim, for nucler power, I'm disappointed.
I'm sorry about that. I don't have it for that.
I've got some more popular mechanics with nuclear powered aircraft.
But let's just go back to the Caravan and the Magnets and the Twin Otter or whatever it was. They of course are, as the general aircraft, have engineers that understand them. They can fix 99% of the thing. The only thing that's changed is the battery and the power. So for a logical transition to perhaps some cargo moving in a caravan in Africa in horrendous weather where maybe you make it optionally piloted. And then on the days when you really have got to get the stuff through for the military or medical supplies, then it can go. And if it goes down, that's that. It doesn't matter quite so much. I can definitely see
bags of options for solar power. Remember, if you're talking Africa, you know, there is a charity called NUNCATS, NUNCATS, and they're actually exploring this whole model of small electric aircraft with a single pilot and a network of small airfields where they plug into the solar farm at each point to charge up again. And actually, that's got some merit. It really has. But it's all about
here at Vertiport Africa, we already have that as a consideration. My our concept of a vertiport, that's already in my planning phase.
Excellent.
So looking at the numbers on that, we need to see a battery improvement of about 10 times before this even begins to be realistic on small aircraft at this moment in time.
Well, it is realistic for a certain niche, which is flight training aircraft. If you want to get it up to the point where bigger aircraft could do it, you probably need about 4 times current technology. So you need to be getting up to 1,000 watt hours per kilogram type numbers, which is not impossible, but it's a tall order. But if you wanted weight for weight to replace fossil fuels with electric and batteries and get the same range, you'd need about 16 times current battery technology. And some battery specialists I've spoken to have said that's never going to happen.
So what about the new, and someone's going to say no, but didn't Tesla just say they're going to do an 5%? They can make their batteries 5% better already, can't they? That's what they're bringing out next. The next battery, the 18650.
Yeah, I read something on that, but it
more
was a
due to
bit of
physical
smoke and
charges.
mirrors in that
Yeah.
figures, because it was 5% over something that they'd underrated already. There was a bit of smoke and mirrors in that one, Mark. There's an article on it somewhere, and they've gone back and gone, well, not really.
That doesn't sound like Tesla. Smoke
Yeah.
and mirrors? Surely not.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because everything's hanging on the battery. The reality, and it's not just aviation. We're in this position as a globe. Every device, whether it be a phone, laptop, drone, aircraft, we've hit the limiting factor, and that limiting factor is power now.
Some of the best people in the world working on battery technology have been for decades, and we're getting, since the lithium batteries, incremental improvements. There's no technology on the horizon that will change things overnight. It's like we're going to get just single percentage increases going forward, I think. And there's nothing on the horizon that makes much difference. There's been many offered promised things like aluminium air batteries and all sorts of things, but they just don't pan out in reality. And there was going to be super caps using nano capacitors, nano technology. It hasn't panned out. The reality is that it's just damn hard to fit that much energy into such a small package in a non-liquid form. The other thing might be the liquid batteries, where they basically the electrolyte contains the charge, and they can recharge the battery just by swapping the electrolyte out. That could be one area where it might start looking thing, because you can drain and replace the electrolyte in one of those batteries in a matter of minutes, just like you can refuel a helicopter with a turbine engine. So when they move, or perhaps if they can move to that liquid battery technology, then we might be able to see the changes necessary to start bringing some economics into this whole equation. But for the traditional battery, where you're just trying to get a chemical reaction to reverse inside the battery as you apply electricity, not going to happen. Then you've got to realize that when you have energy densities that high, there's some really important safety factors involved here. Sure, Jet A1, if you can't even light it, put a cup of Jet A1 on the table, put a match in it, it won't even burn. But if you have that, you look at a lithium battery when it goes up, you can't put the damn thing out because it creates its own oxygen, its own oxidizer and fuel source. They are very difficult. So it puts a whole different risk profile onto operations when you've got an electric power system. And there's already been some fatalities due to electric power systems in aircraft.
Name one of those in the slides that caught fire and burnt itself out. One of them did.
One of Williams' aircraft burnt, basically. Aviation, Alice prototype, had a massive electrical fire and burnt, which was tragic for them because it's actually quite a good design, I think. It's a real issue. That amount of stored energy in electrical form can go bang and on fire awfully fast.
We've seen it.
Gary,
A few cars.
Gary, I gotta ask.
Yeah.
You still want to do that e-bike? You sure about that?
You has a water seat.
You've
He's
seen
riding on a ticking flame.
You look
Absolutely.
at Richard Hammond's Rimac accident. That was a bad one, but that was that was an electric car that went very, very badly. We've had these Tesla incidents in the last 24 hours or so. There's was it Porsche had a few of their full electrics completely go up and burn themselves through the road. So and it's the damage. If you look at when I've seen a few car fires, they're fairly quick to get under control. It's amazing actually how good fire brigades are at getting a traditional car fire under control. These electrics, there's nothing they can do. They just got to let it burn itself down.
Because that Rilmac, when that car came off Richard Hammond was in, it was still burning 3 to 4 days later because the cells were still popping away. They'll just keep going.
They couldn't stop it. They would just stand there and get the sausages out.
They'll be right in the middle of London. It'll be fine when that goes down through a building. What can be wrong with that? What can the problem be? I don't get the fuss myself. I don't get the fuss.
If it happened in the McDonald's drive-through, the food would even taste better.
Get these heliports. McDonald's going to get these heliports so I can just take the helicopter and go to a McDonald's.
But it's all that. Well, that's why I have the Joke Vertiport Africa project, because that, in a lot of ways, is far more important than the aircraft. It's all the fiddly bits that are hanging off the edge of it. How are you going to charge it? What's it going to look like? How many people can live in X distance from it? And if none of that infrastructure piece works, then it doesn't matter how good the aircraft is. It's and somebody said in the comments there was an FAA that was a bit further back up. Here we are. Cloud Splitter said it, so let's put that back up. city centre, 30 miles savings over going by train 8 minutes. Yeah, and the weather. So we all know if you've got time to spare, you go by air, especially in the smaller stuff. We're not taught, you can't have sort of airline expectations of these small craft where big airliners go pretty much all weather these days, don't they? The little stuff still doesn't. And yeah, there's many days here. Go on.
Can you imagine though? You know, how many days are they actually going to be able to fly? That's the big question, isn't it? Because what wind levels will it handle? What weather extremes will it handle? You know, oh right, I'm going to go. Oh, I'll have to take the bus today because the drone's not flying, so I'll take the bus.
But if it's pilotless, it'll always be IFR, so the fog and the rain won't matter.
No,
Well, that's true.
What's going to hurt them is icing. If you're in a northern or far southern climate, icing conditions in cloud is going to be a massive issue for these types of vehicles because they will not have the power available on board to de-ice.
Yeah.
So I don't think they get icing clearances.
And then I must make a note of that. I'll put that in Vertiport Africa's equipment list. But that's it. So hang on a minute, we could have the icing gear, but then you've got to have. But we'll have snow here soon. We will have ice. We'll have freezing days for several days.
It's more than that. It's the whole heat element. You know, one of the big, the temperature of the aircraft, the temperature of the batteries is a major issue. Do you know what I mean? Okay, they'll keep themselves warm to a point, but one of the unseen issues in electric cars is keeping the occupant warm. And that has become a major problem because it's burning energy they just don't have. And, we've got used to on ICE cars simply just using that lovely waste heat that we didn't need for anything. Whereas there's had to be some really clever work done around heating the occupant and not the cabin. And directing the heat, and you're going to have the same issues with this. And you think, what if there's a couple of, let's just say, imagine we could have a couple of 100 kilowatts of batteries in the bottom. If the temp in the middle of winter, you're going to get half the battery time that you're getting in summer, and all of those kind of issues as well.
Yeah, they're definitely things to deal with.
I'm
going to have to say goodbye, I'm afraid. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me along.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to pull out those excellent slides, and please keep posting. Follow Tim on LinkedIn, people. That's where to find him. He's the troublemaker. He's known as over there. So follow him there and joust with him and the others. So thank you very, very much indeed, and hopefully we can invite you again the next time we're controversial.
Yeah, that would be great. All right.
Perfect. Thank you, Tim. Thanks very much. Take care. Cheers now. Bye-bye. Blimey. We had a grown-up in the room, didn't we?
Yeah, that sort of spoiled the show.
Yeah.
Someone who knows what they're talking about.
Oh, bugger. Yeah.
Apart from Nicola. Nicola knows what he's talking about.
He does know what he's talking about. He's going to convert my electric bike for you. Let me find a picture of the bike.
Don't know enough so that my gibberish sounds like something.
Yes, there's an element of that, isn't there? It's amazing the hype around it all, and I can't help thinking a lot of attention is going off.
I don't get why people want these things flying above us either. Because you imagine the noise, that would be the biggest thing. People moan about a Mavic or a Phantom. You wait till those things overfly.
No, I saw a graph. I think it came out yesterday from one of the manufacturers, and it's almost like quieter than birds tweeting, feathers floating down from on high, and things like that. It had people talking, and it had the noise level of it in their diagram just above people talking, and you think, that can't be true. That cannot be true.
That was 16 small rotors.
Yeah, well, it can't, can it? It's.
Yeah, what distance did they do it at? That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, the people were this far away, and the graph was 2 mile away. Yeah, that's right. On the other side of some buildings and woods. Yeah. All right, back down to earth, back down to our normal level of stuff. This Air 2S, I can't remember what it's called now. Do I want one or don't I want one? What's that new thing?
It's a good aircraft. You won't go far wrong. Not really a lot to say. There's been no real news. It's no one's. I've not seen. This is the funny element. A single smashed one up yet.
Oh, really?
By now, we had at least 300 DJI Jones that had been incinerated. Whereas the map, yeah, it's a good aircraft. Nothing. If you haven't got a modern drone, camera drone, you won't go far wrong. That's the best I can say about it. It's about as good as it gets right now.
I must admit, I'm still up for the Mavic 2 Pro. I think that will be the one I would still plumb for.
It's a bit big, Mark, and it's a bit. I flew mine the other day, and it's still a bit big.
It's not big. You're flying Inspire 2.
Yeah, that's way too big for the kind of stuff I like to do these days.
You actually need to think. You need to think about moving that on, actually.
Yeah, the Inspire. Yeah, no, I won't sell the Inspire. It's not worth it. I'm at that stage. It's not worth selling now. I've seen some prices going. I couldn't justify selling it at 1,500 quid. I'm just not willing to do it. People have been selling them at £1,500. So
I'm just putting this up. This will seem weird. But this is what I'm trying to buy for under €100. Is one of these, and it's hanging up, and that's what Nicola's worried about me ripping a guy off for converting. Note the double crossbar at the top there, the pig crossbar, as that's called.
Is that like a GoPro?
You need a 360 camera now, Gary. Everyone's gone 360. I've been looking at these 360 ones myself. You've got to get a 360 now. You should have a live streaming 360 camera now, Gary, so we can look around all of the junk in the room rather than just the behind you. So we can choose the stuff we can look at. Yeah.
Just realised I've left this here. This is the school library computer.
You're happy
library management. No, setting up a library management service. So what other news have we seen? The Mavic 2 Pro will make it over 5 years. This means a lot of value, 250.
There's been a lot of noise about, actually. Yeah. There's been a lot of noise about this AC ratings, and I talked about it on Sunday because there's people jumping up and down everywhere, going, "Why aren't any of these drones C rated? We're not going to be able to fly them in a year's time." And there has been a bit of under the radar news on that, which came out in December, and I missed this. And it is the fact that the EASA are going to allow manufacturers to retrospectively classify aircraft, and this sort of went under the radar. There's no paperwork on it. We never see the out and out info on it, but what it means is what you're buying today could potentially be. But the reality is this: they are not required to make an aircraft, they're not required to have a C rating aircraft to sell in the EU until the 1st of January 2023. So they have no real incentive to bang any out until that day. And that's the reality. And I said this before, don't think manufacturers care about you. And I've said this to a few times. DJI, Parrot, they don't give two hoots if it hurts you that your aircraft no longer works because the legislation's kicking in. They will more than happily sell you one that does comply, and that's their business, and that's where they're at.
So, did you also see EASA have said we're going to release the stuff on the specific category? Have you seen that? Yeah. Now, they're going to do how your aircraft will be rated in a specific category. They haven't given a timeline yet, to my knowledge, when that will kick in. But that's quite scary as well, because, in the UK, we've been flying, as we do for a long time now, but they're saying, it's going to be Sora. Is it Sora version 2 or 3 or something they're talking about now as well to go with this? Yeah. It's just,
it's all very hit and miss on all of it, and it's the C ratings, the actual laws, everything. The ASTM standard, has anyone actually seen it yet for remote ID? I think we'll see the first C rated aircraft around August next year. That's when I think we'll start to see them.
You'd be wanting to take yourself off to this virtual event then, Mark.
I already want to shoot myself already.
Which is here is 7th to the 5th, 10 to 11:30. Not long, is it? It's an hour and a half. go and watch that for an hour and a half, and they'll sort you out there. That's on SES News for anyone that wants to go to that. Things are coming out, but yet again, we are experiencing lots of people saying, "I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know this was coming. What's all this nonsense?" And this is our own worst enemies.
And this is the problem. To be fair to the EU regulations, and Bruce won't like this, but you're gaining benefit by the C rating and the open categories. So if you look at the very basics, the old rules were non-congested, not near people, 50 meters, 150 meters, depending on what it was. A C-rated aircraft in the open category gives you more benefits than that. So you're getting something more. Now, the frustration for people will be, sorry, Mark, 1 second. They have an aircraft today, which is in the transitional, which allows them to do one thing. When we hit then that crossover next year, that aircraft will actually take a step back in the category it's in. So today you can do more with it than you can after the transitional period expires. And that's where people are getting a bit frustrated.
Only if you hold the A2, because the open category, it's very confusing, isn't it? Because you go open category.
Yes.
What's really interesting about the open category, the A3, you can fly up to 25 kilos. But what's really bizarre, up to 20 kilos, you don't have to have insurance.
No.
If you're in Cap 722, as soon as you add an extra 5 kilos and jump to 20, you want to fly from 20 to 25, you actually have to have a third-party insurance of some kind.
You do, and that's the weird thing. And because A3 is basically what we had before, isn't it? Yeah. A3 is basically the old rules. That's yeah. And that's where I think people are getting a bit frustrated. But I'm not expecting to see any C-rated aircraft till this time next year onwards. Why? Why would you want to do it? Why would you want to do something now when you can sell them something else later?
Yeah, the Air 3S or the Air 3 and the next versions, there's some money to be made there if I make the C version. That's what you want, isn't it? If you're the manufacturer, you want a bit more money. And I'll change the battery again, so it's a new battery and everything.
Yes, that's a good thing with the Air S. To be fair, the 2S, it's the same batteries. It's for the most part, they're interchangeable. There's a lot of transition. To be honest, it's probably the best camera drone bang for buck right now, period. But it's not a product you upgrade to unless you're sitting on a very older Mavic, maybe a Mavic Air, maybe a Phantom 3, something like that.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is the people going, we're going to buy. They bought the Mini for the freedom of the Mini grid. But then they've gone, I'm going to buy an Air 2S, and suddenly realise, well, I'm now going to fly to the rules, but the rules of this machine. And I bought a little one so I could do everything like overfly the city. But now I'm going to buy one where I was moaning about where I could fly the heavier machine anyway. It's really weird. It's really weird on the groups.
We're starting to see a big jump. I've noticed in the last couple of weeks. The industry seems to have woke back up. Whether it be the filming industry especially has definitely woke up in the last couple of weeks. I'm even seeing it from content being viewed around things like the Ronin and those professional products. They weren't getting any views last year, and now they're suddenly overnight jumping up. So it's almost like people are going back to work now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to the review or our show and tell for the Cine Lifter. That's coming out of the UK. I can't remember the name of the thing off the top of my head. I should, as ever, not very well rehearsed. But I think we might even be talking about that next week. I'm not sure, with the designer and developer of that. Because, there's no doubt people are getting into the idea of more specialist stuff. I'm also interested in seeing in the groups people asking, what's a realistic salary? And that's caused some interesting answers and responses. Before I get into this, how much can I earn? It's like, not as much as you think. But it's but with no skill, because because the point where I was trying to go with that was, if you buy a cine lifter, it's not going to make you a professional photographer or a professional cinematographer. Just having the gear, all the gear and no idea in a lot of cases, isn't it? It's going to help, but you need the skills.
If you've got the skills, if you can fly right and you fly for the right team, you can do all right. So if you work for a TV production company and you're a top pilot and you can fly well, and there are the good ones in the UK, they do all right. Okay, they do all right because they've got they're there. However, if you're just a normal flyer or a normal operator, you've got to build your business up from scratch. It's not easy to go and work for someone else. I think Cyberhawk start their pilots off on about 18K, which is nothing really. If you think about it, that's not a lot at all. So when people go, what can you earn? Well, it depends who you're working for, or you're working for yourself, what kind of jobs you're doing or you're doing for yourself. It's such a minefield. Anyone thinks they're going to earn 100K a year being a remote pilot? No. You'd have your own business and you'd be pulling in some big clients and doing stuff. It's the only way to get that kind of money. Just as a normal remote pilot, you won't earn that kind of money in my head anyway.
Well, actually, we haven't heard much from Nicola, so let's pull Nicola in now. What are you flying at the minute? What's on the bench, Nicola?
Well, the Dolphin is up for repair yet again because it has had some misunderstandings between it and the autopilot and some, overlooking on my part of certain things, which still... I find it mind-boggling how that happened. But, 2 crashes on 2 takeoff attempts, both in exactly the same bloody way because of the same bloody reason. So, just the scar locations on the nose are just different. So, it's getting a lot of yellow glue lines. But good news is that foam is pretty nice because it doesn't squash. It just breaks off cleanly, so it's quite easy to put back together.
Removing the requirement for nose weight, then the more times you do it, then the less nose weight you'll need, which is very it's much.
That is actually not a good thing because I want to get it to a point where I can put the larger lithium-ion batteries in there. Right now, I'm having to fly with a 1800. 4S LiPo, and that's like a 15-minute flight at most.
Pilot speed, yeah, I agree, Rat Race. And you got Bruce shaking his head there. It's a niche possible windmill, yes. Yeah.
I just got off the phone with CAA.
Did you?
That call I had was CAA. They're investigating our local council.
Why didn't you put it on live?
They're investigating our local council for potentially breaching what regulations by flying a drone near a helipad without the necessary certifications.
Who, you or
no, the council?
The
council that for many years told us you can't fly within 4 kilometres of an airport or a helipad, did it themselves. How odd is that?
Is that your man in your gumboots who got out the helicopter with the rotors running? My goodness me!
So why have they phoned you, Bruce? They were looking for another criminal to come for him because if they've done anything wrong.
No, I went full Karen and dobbed them in. I went into full Karen mode. I thought, if you're going to persecute me and make it so difficult for me to convince you that people should be allowed to fly their drones in the parks, if you're going to go and break the rules and you keep quoting them at us and health and safety, well, they who live by the sword shall die by the sword. So I made no bones about it. I could have made an anonymous complaint, but I'm happy to put my face to it and say, look, you guys don't follow the rules, you get in trouble.
Why were your council flying a drone near a helicopter? Why were they flying a drone?
Well, because the local park, they wanted to do a video promoting consultation with the public over something. And the local park with the lake is 900 meters from the helipad at the hospital. And I said to them, look, if you ever want any footage, just give me a shout. You can have it for free. I've got heaps of footage of the lake. But oh no, because it's you, Mr. Simpson, we'll do it ourselves. We're not going to be beholden to you for anything. So they went out and flew their drone over the lake and an alleged breach of Part 101, 205. So, hey ho.
Gosh. Yes. Well, flying near a hospital helipad, that ain't nothing to be sniffed at, is it really? Gosh, wow, exciting times. So, but yeah, as Max says, it's come full circle. So you're getting all sides of the coin now. That's good. Your knowledge is increasing of how they operate. And have you had any better, more positive outcomes from your new man? I thought he was going to be positive, or is it all down these new rules that
No,
are coming?
I haven't contacted him yet. He's a very busy man, but the guy I was talking to this morning, he likes him too, and he says he seems to be a breath of fresh air. And so it's looking quite positive in that regard. And they're obviously aware of the directive to make it more pragmatic about the way you deal with technical infringements, because the council's infringement was technical. And I knew they wouldn't get a written warning like I did. I'm sure they will just be educated, as is the normal thing. But the fact that they knew, because they've already stated you can't do this, it's not education, is it? It's arrogance.
Oh, here we are. Racer Rats thanking you. Let's show you that. 2012. There we are. Good stuff. All right. So what other stories have we seen, gentlemen, this week? Because we seem to be running at a slow pace.
Have we done Mars yet? Did we do Mars?
Mars. Yeah, I eat them.
Do you notice?
Quite nice.
I've noticed now, because this is a positive story. The BBC didn't say that NASA flew a drone on Mars. It was a helicopter. Even though if we'd done it here on Earth and near an airport, it would have been a drone. But no, if it's on Mars, it's a helicopter. How clever are they? How discreet are they in terms of how they define things?
Whilst it's great and it's fun and it's good and it was a lot of money, it's a long way away. I can't help feeling a tinge of disappointment, because this one that won, the one that they were going to try was a glider. They were going to try and do some soaring up there. Now that would have been outstanding. That would have been amazing if that worked.
I wonder what your glide ratios would be, though. And of course, a glider to deal with that thin amount of air would have to be very, very large with a very low wing loading. So maybe it just wasn't practical. Maybe,
but I still would have preferred a glider.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to do.
I'm
going to do a video shortly of how all these regulators have to realize that if it wasn't for us in the hobby that had started playing with multi-Wiis and RC model parts and built the first multi-rotors and played with them and had shown what they can do, we wouldn't have had that drone flying on Mars yesterday. And so there's a huge debt to the hobby, yet the regulators are trying to put us out of business. So this could be the last time we see any real innovation that leads to this sort of thing. They've got to pay that debt back by saying, gosh, we owe you guys for all the work you've done. We shouldn't be making it so difficult for you to enjoy your hobby in a safe way. In fact, NASA themselves spoke about how the drone was inspired by a toy that somebody got, a little rubber helicopter toy, and how that was safe and all that sort of stuff. So NASA acknowledged the inspiration and the work that's gone on, but the regulators are dismissing it as totally irrelevant, and we must stop this now.
Here's a question for Nicola then. So what's it like knowing that NASA have done something a bit further distance than yourself?
Well,
at least they didn't hit a mountain.
Never gonna let me live this down, are you?
No, never.
Well, a lot of people have done greater distances than me, so meh. It is an amazing achievement, though. Sending something out there in an environment you haven't really been in, haven't really experienced, in an atmosphere that thin, and having done all the calculations in simulation, right, for it to actually be able to take flight, even hover, pretty amazing stuff.
That's why we have computers, isn't it? But I'm surprised with the 1% atmosphere density that they could actually fly the damn thing. 1% of the density of the atmosphere on Earth, and that flew. There's only 1/3 the gravity, but that's still amazing that they can get that much. You can't breathe that air, but it's enough to make you fly. It's amazing.
Well, I suppose. Well, would it fly? How would it fly at ground level here? Because where I'm trying to take this is, well, why couldn't it go straight up here to 1% of atmosphere? Gravity.
So it'd have to be awfully high, very high.
Yeah, it
well above.
Be very high, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So you'd need a lot of energy to get it there, which means it wouldn't be the right weight when it got there.
Exactly. Well, no.
At least they did a better job of tuning the PIDs than DJI did with their FPV drone.
Why did you say that? Because you don't like them.
The tuning's a bit rough. Let's put it that way.
Here's the next question. are the two FPV drones still in one piece?
I nearly lost it yesterday, to be fair.
Yeah, we both got still in one piece.
I nearly binned it in acro mode. I went down behind a hedge looking at a boat. What's really frustrating is it stops bloody recording the second you have something like that. So the signal dropped off. So I can't see what actually happened. That's
Why
the problem.
does it stop recording?
They don't want
DJI
evidence of the crash.
They don't want to. It's bloody stupid. Even the aircraft stops. It doesn't need to stop.
But all the other DJI stuff, if it disconnects, keeps recording.
Yes.
That's not a fault, it's a feature. I can't think why.
It's probably too busy going, oh my God, what do I do now? And so it has to stop something.
Something is off with the way they're processing the image on this drone. It's still not. It's not like the camera drones. It's got a huge amount of noise and stuff like that. And I wonder if they're doing something a little bit funky with the data stream, because on the normal DJI drones, they have two data streams. So you have one data stream for camera SD recording and a lower data stream for live view. Now on the Phantom 3 Pro, for instance, the difference between the Pro and Advance was there was a dedicated video encoder for the live feed, whereas on the Advance one there wasn't. So what would happen is it would limit you to the maximum bitrate on the recording because it was sharing that between the recording and the live feed. And I just wonder if they're doing some sharing again on this. And the reason it's dropping is when the feed drops, the recording stream kicks out as well. Bloody weird.
Gosh.
Well, that'll be in version 2. Version 2 feature continues recording when in failsafe.
There's a load of it. I still can't believe it hasn't had an update. There's a believed firmware update for the Mavic Air 2S this week. Out the door, week 1, usual fix. Yet we're a month, Bruce? We're over a month, aren't we, on the FPV drone?
Well over.
Yeah, and nothing.
It must be time for him to stop the line soon then.
There's no major bugs. To be fair, there's none of the usual, they need to fix that. But there's some real frustrations. The gimbal camera switch doesn't work in acro mode. Why? I can't get my head around that. There's a switch that allows you to choose one of 3 preset positions for the camera, and it works in GPS mode and GPS modes, but it doesn't work in acro. Makes no sense at all. It would be really handy when landing in acro to be able to just flick it to the neutral position and have the camera straight.
Do you land in acro or do you switch to normal
I don't
mode?
dare risk landing
So
in acro. There's a lot of little tweaks. They need to move the format option to a much simpler location because it's buried in the camera menu, and every time you want to format the card, you spend 5 minutes messing with it. There's a few little tweaks it needs.
Yeah, well, I won't be rushing to buy one.
No.
I wouldn't anyway. And it was nice that the Air 2S was filmed here in South Africa. That was I quite like that video was all places I knew, so that was quite good.
You're looking going, they didn't make that with that. A huge amount of reviews went out on that. What was interesting was, and they've not done their own people any favors because the view counts are decent on some videos, but some big names have got some shocking numbers. For them. They'll be looking at this going, I've got 15,000 views, where these are guys who should be at 70, 80,000.
And I had to sign my life away in order to make the video.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, the NDAs are never that bad for that kind of stuff. There's certain things. It depends whether you're classed as a KOL or whether you're classed as an influencer, because they have like multiple levels, and sometimes they want you to do promotion and stuff like that. And that was the reason I wasn't getting involved with the drone. But for the most part, for those guys, it'll just be sign the sheet of paper and get on with it. But it was in so many people's hands. So many people's hands. Has Philip Bloom even released his review yet? Because Philip was holding back because he said there's no point putting it out because it's just going to get lost. When you got someone of his stature, Philip is a filmmaker. He has a very good reputation, and even he's openly saying, I'm not releasing my video because it's going to get drowned out.
That could be a valid point from Wolf there.
I think they probably sabotaged a lot of that market with the FPV drone. A lot of people that were just waiting to buy a drone with the lockouts easing rushed out and bought the FPV drone. They're not going to go and spend another $1,000 to buy this thing. And so I think they've had to, and I think that shows in the views people are getting on videos. People have said, no, I bought my drone. I'm not going to bother looking at another one. I don't need another one. Can't afford another one. And I think we've reached peak drone anyway. And there's no compelling features in that new drone that would make you take your existing Air 2 or your whatever and get rid of it just to buy that new drone. The camera's better and a few bits and pieces, but it's not going to be a game changer. And I think they may have a hard job pushing that out there as much. With the FPV drone was a much bigger success because it had something different, a point of distinction. And this isn't. It's just an incremental improvement.
Some people have had good news. No, Philip still hasn't released his review. That says everything. Philip Bloom's still delayed it. Some of these numbers are 2,000 views. It's 20,000 views on that channel. Should be 100K.
Well, there we are. There's the from Rat Race. So we'll buy another one to a CE mark. Well, we're probably getting into the new car sort of territory. I don't know. I never bought a new car, but I think it's 4 or 5 years, isn't it? People take before they buy a new car. And, they've bought their drone. So we'll wait 2 or 3 years, 4 or 5 years, then we'll buy the next one. If I still want to be in it, they might have had enough.
It is that category. Sorry, Mark. It's that iPhone. What was probably the iPhone peaked at about the 8. The spec wise, about the 8, it was as fast as it ever needed to be. The cameras were as good as you could want on a phone. Everything after that's just been incrementals.
And I'm still flying my Phantom 4 Pro from 2015.
But still a current model.
I will not change the aircraft.
Well, my Phantom 3 Pro's over behind me there.
There's camera drones. I think DJI are right in them. What they're doing is going smaller and lighter, and I think that's probably where the best way to go for camera drones is now, because the cameras are good enough. 1-inch sensor. No one needs a variable aperture. Most people don't know how to use it anyway. So that's they're just going to make these. Let's look at what's next. So next is a Mavic Mini with a 1-inch sensor. That's the reality of this. All they've done over the last few. There is nothing on the A2S we haven't already seen in one way or another. It is simply just right. Open the parts bin. What can we put together to make a drone that costs $999? And it happens to be a really good price point from a spec point of view. But at the end of the day, you fly it, you take a couple of pictures.
The Mini 2 has to be the best option if someone wants to buy a drone today, though, because of the regulatory framework. Yeah. So I think they need to put more effort into that. But while the regulations keep getting tighter and tighter, people are less inclined to buy drones. I've got one, I will use that until we can't use it anymore, and maybe we'll look at it then. I don't think people are upgrading like they do with their phones and the cars and things in a regular cycle.
Well, the good news in the UK, because, today the CA said, we've announced a BV loss, so the regulators are doing good things. They're going, it's innovative and it's forward thinking. And I looked at it and went, oh.
Yeah, same again, isn't it? More of the same. It was nothing all that amazing.
So the CA BV loss announcement today for the UK by a certain company was nothing amazing. PFCO holders had it a few years ago, and it was written into so if anyone's watching and you had an old PFCO, probably in Ian's, wrong way, it's up there, but in Ian's first PFCOs, I suspect it says he could do exactly what they're talking about in this new thing. And it looks like they want to make it a PDRA as well, because they're saying, they want to use that for testing to then bring it out to the wider drone community. And I'm thinking, well, just give us what we used to have, and we would have it anyway. No one's died when I did it, when I was doing it under my PFCO. No one died. There was no big fireballs anywhere. No helicopters walking out the sky.
Hang on. I've got my Belper manual here. Looking only a matter of time, Mark.
Yeah,
as sure as there were drones at Gatwick, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
Sure as there were drones at Gatwick. As sure as that.
I mean, even in Ian's old PFCOs, if you've still got your old PFCOs, Ian, on your computer, if you flip to your first one, you'll probably find section, I think it's part 2, section D, you'll see the wording for what you used to be able to do. It's crazy. They're saying it's like innovative, this BV loss announcement, and it's all in the sandbox environment, but we were all out in the wild doing it. And if there was no accident back then, why do you need more testing in a sandbox environment? I don't get it.
Well, this is the thing that annoys me too. That the regulators have this: a drone is a drone is a drone, and there's some concessions made for sub 250. But what they don't realise is a lot of the regulations they're proposing, I'm fully behind them for large commercial drones. But for small recreational craft, they are just completely inappropriate, and the regulators refuse to draw the distinction. Now, in the EU, you've got this risk-based categories and things, which does it to a degree, but it's still some kid with a toy plane. Why the hell can't they just go down the park and fly the damn thing?
Well, the worst thing about this is, Bruce, we had it originally. We had this kind of permission as commercial operators before. This is the bizarre thing. We actually had this permission in our permissions from the CAA, and then they turn around, took it away because people were misusing it. Instead of telling those people, no, you write it in the ops manual as it says in the permission, and stop doing what you're doing and sort yourselves out and do it correctly. They took it away, which is a sad thing, but it's been done before. This exact thing that they're talking about was being done in the wild without a sandbox, and no one died. Like I say, no one died, nothing blew up, no planes fell out of the sky, no helicopters. But they announced it as an innovative thing, and it's a first. It's not a first. It's not innovative. We've done it before.
No.
Speaking of planes falling out of the sky, did you see that warbird land on the beach in the water? Now that's interesting, isn't it? If you'd flown a drone over those people and crashed it into the water, could you imagine the furor about someone flew a drone over people and crashed into the water? It could have hit somebody, but this guy who wanted to make sure his plane was recoverable didn't land further out away from the swimmers. He flew over the top of people swimming in the water and just managed to luckily found a little spot where he could dump the aircraft close to the beach. And people are saying, what a wonderful pilot, what a great thing. Well, hang on a minute. That was incredibly dangerous because he flew over so many people when that thing was coming in. And if something had gone wrong and it dropped a wing, stalled or something like that, people could have died. But no, he's a fantastic pilot. I'm thinking, I don't really agree with that.
Yeah, and you're right. He was actually quite close to the beach, wasn't he? He wasn't far out. He was only like 20 meters, 30 meters out, wasn't he? He wasn't.
Yeah, if you look at you see he flies over people in the water at 2 meters above them. I'm thinking, my God, that would get you pilloried. If you did that with a drone, even a Phantom, you flew over 2 feet over people's heads while I was swimming, you would get your ass kicked until the end of the week. But this guy, no, what a hero, because he wanted to save his plane.
The whole thing didn't serve him well, did it? And the full accident report will be out in the full fullness of time, but be interesting to see what other options he had in that local area, land side and other things.
Well, the wind would normally be coming off the sea anyway. If I'm correct, the wind normally comes off the sea in coastal areas
during the daytime.
Yeah. So he landed crosswind as well. If there was a breeze and it was coming off the sea, he landed crosswind as well, because he didn't land. He should have turned to go to what
I
there might not be much
to land into the waves is about pitching over.
But I mean, he could have been 100 meters further out from the shore, and it would have been totally safe. But he chose to land close to the shores because he knew that the plane would be more recoverable, and which was the whole thing, to save the plane, recover the plane, even though once it's been dipped in seawater, it's probably going to be pretty useless.
Yes.
You just get some big bags of silica gel and put it in rice.
Rice, yes. And of course, the electronic engine control unit in those warbirds, that was pretty simple. I think it was just a couple of magnetos, wasn't it?
Oh dear, Louis putting some one landed on the beach killed 2 people on a beach, one of them a child. There we are, one landing on a beach. Yeah, I know, because people don't know they're coming because you're not making the noise. One chap put his light aircraft down on the highway here this week, and there's video footage of last week, video footage of from a truck of it just dropping down in between. With that, Bruce goes. So yeah, there's been incidents and accidents as ever, all over everywhere. Oh, instruction as student. Oh, dearly, that's terrible. That is terrible. Well, look, we are definitely in ramble mode. So has anyone else seen anything else before we go this week? Oh, microphone?
No, I've not seen much.
Oh, he's back. I failed to get us all away before he got back.
Damn, I clicked the wrong button. Too many buttons on the screen. It's terrible.
Too many buttons. I was just saying we were sort of going into rant mode, so I was just seeing if anyone else had anything else before I pulled the plug on this one. Going once, going twice. Thank you very, very much to Tim Watkins, who was very well prepared, over prepared for us.
The adult in the room.
Should we give him a score? Should we rate him out of 10? Everybody put your little cards up now.
Oh, yeah.
We should do that with guests, give them a rating, you know. I think that would encourage more people to come on.
Yes or no? Yes or no? Yeah, no, definitely a 10. Definitely a 10 or 11, in fact. So that was excellent. So thank you, Tim. Find him on Tim Watkins. Find him on LinkedIn. And he doesn't say a lot, but whenever he does say something, is always right.
I think you can find everybody and all their phone numbers and their contact details now that LinkedIn's been scalped. You can find them on the dark web. You don't need to go to LinkedIn.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yes, you can also do it that way. Absolutely, you're right. So with that,
LinkedIn profile then.
Sorry.
Good thing I don't have a LinkedIn profile then.
Oh yeah. There's just the
Facebook
one
too.
Yeah.
Did you see the email at Facebook sent accidentally to the media saying we need to normalize this this type of thing happening? God, no. Oh, terrible.
Yeah,
that's what happens when you put Nick Clegg in charge of policy or whatever they did. You see.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, with that Nick Clegg bombshell, I wish you all a farewell, gentlemen, and thank you again, Tim. Dear viewer, wherever you might be in the world, wear a mask, wash your hands, be safe, and all those other good things. Look after yourselves as you lot in the north go into summer. We'll grin and bear it down here in the south, and we'll see you again next week, similar sort of time, 2100 GMT. Cheers for now. Bye bye.